Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Casper.
You know, my experience with this, with the draft, I mean, like, it definitely will go down as one of the most memorable experiences I've been able to have in my sports life, in my life in general, and that. But, you know, first of all, tip of the cap to Green Bay, because I came in, I'll be honest, I came in with some, I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer or anything like that, but I was really curious on how Green Bay was going to handle this, how everything was gonna play out and such. But they blew the doors off the expectations. I know a lot of the outside expectations were, you know, numbers wise, maybe a couple 100,000. Ended up being a total of 600,000. Didn't set record set by Detroit, who had 750,000. So I know Detroit fans are using that still as bragging such. But I mean, for a small town in Green Bay, and really no bigger town. I mean, the closest big city is Milwaukee. Hour and a half away or so. For Green Bay to be able to hold 600, or to be able to get 600,000 people in the first night, 205,000, and then on a rainy second day, 175,000. Then second day or third day was 220,000. Kudos to Green Bay. Kudos to Mark Murphy. Mark Murphy has been trying to get the draft in Green Bay for years and got it while he's set to retire in a couple months. And a tip of the cap to Mark Murphy when he announced that first pick of Matthew Golden. Got the crowd to pop. I mean, everybody saw it by now, right? I mean, the crowd to pop. If you weren't there and you watched it on TV, it was louder in person when the fans were going nuts when he said it was a wide receiver. But a big time tip of the cap to Mark Murphy for getting the draft to Green Bay, and a tip of the cap to the city of Green Bay and to the organization for being able to pull this off. Because again, I had my doubts on how it was going to go. And at least from my experience, it was awesome. It was fantastic. So I know the parking was, you know, you had to pay a lot, but we ended up finding this nice couple for our second day. I mean, you had people, you know, charging $100, $125, $150 for the first day, and we found this sweet couple. Normal $40, and easy out, easy in, easy out. They didn't want to price gouge anybody, and it was just kind of funny. Their neighbors were like 150, and then right there was 40. And got to give that sweet couple a shout out over there. Prices definitely went down on the second day, though. Don't know if they got a little greedy after day one and realized that, you know, people weren't doing it, and I think a lot of people were taking advantage of the shuttles and such. But and like I mentioned a little bit earlier, maybe it was just where we were at, but boy, it was easier to get out and not really any traffic jams getting out like there is on game day. So I don't know if it was just the area we were at or they figured out something, but maybe they could use that in terms of when it gets to the season and game days and such, because it was easier getting out for the draft, at least in my opinion, than it was during a game and that. But I mean, experience-wise, you know, Radio Row, it's completely different from Super Bowl. I mean, it doesn't even compare. Super Bowl, it's like a who's who. Everybody's walking through. You got celebrities, you got players, you got athletes and that, and they're willing to do interviews. It's not like that at the draft, okay? It's not even close to like that at the draft. It's more of a workroom. They call it Radio Row, but it's more of a workroom for the media. And the only people you can talk to are other credentialed media in there. So it's not like celebrities or athletes walking through and looking to do interviews. So it's not even, I don't even want to compare it because it's not the same. It's not. And I mean, for one, on Thursday it didn't open up until 3, and then it didn't open up until noon on Friday. So whereas Radio Row, when we've gone there before, I mean, we were able to do our shows from there and such. So it doesn't compare because the only people that have access to it are credentialed media, and so it's not even comparable to that. But I will say, from where we had access for on Thursday and Friday to be right next to the stage and to experience some of that. And I mean, it was pretty darn awesome. It was pretty darn awesome. And I don't know what else to say other than it was one for the books, and definitely a memory I will never, ever, ever forget. It was a lot of walking. My legs, my shins still flipping hurt from a lot of walking. It was a lot of miles put on in the mobile man cave, driving back and forth to the hotel to Green Bay and then going back home and that. So a lot of miles put on that. A lot of miles put on the feet and the knees and the older body and such. But you know what? It was well worth it. It was incredibly well worth it. I know a lot of people, tried sending messages on social media and such, asking where we were at and that. And apologies if I didn't. I'll be honest, I didn't return a lot of them because, for one, it was a lot, and I appreciate people reaching out and that. But also, we were pretty darn busy trying to do a bunch of stuff and that too. So the reception always wasn't the greatest, depending on how we were at too. So my apologies for not getting back to everybody. That wasn't doing that on purpose or anything like that. It was just a lot going on and just constantly doing things. But the best way I could describe, because I know I'm going to get asked about it, it was awesome, and it was a tip of the cap again to the city of Green Bay, to the Packers, and to everybody who ran the event. It was awesome, and it was a job well done. And I know I said that it's probably never coming back to Green Bay. I thought that before heading into this. I'm kind of taking a step back from that because, again, from my experience, it was awesome, and I thought it was well done. I want to take a little bit of a step back from that. Now, I don't think it'll be coming back anytime soon because I think they want to try to go through as many different cities and NFL teams as possible. But now I'm not saying it never will again. Maybe in 20 years, 15, 20, 25 years, whatever the case may be, maybe it will again, but not like within 5 years or 10 years or anything like that. But I think what Green Bay was able to do and what they were able to prove to a lot of people, not only in the NFL world but in the general public, I think there's a chance that it could come back to Green Bay. But man, it was a fantastic. And if you weren't there, I mean, I know I mentioned it on Friday, but seeing the stage and seeing everything built up around Lambeau Field, it's just weird. It was kind of weird to see a stage that was bigger than any music festival around here, or I can't even compare the size of it all. I can't even compare. I mean, it did look like Green Bay outside of Lambeau Field being right there and kind of the center of a lot of stuff. It didn't look like Green Bay for everything they had built up. And the fact that they're now got to tear it all down and pack it all up and such. I mean, it was... I don't know how they pulled it off. I really don't. But it was massive. The environment, and again, maybe it was just where I was at. I was mostly around like the Resch Center area. But environment-wise, leading up to the whole thing, and I don't know if anybody experienced anything similar to it, just felt like a game day. It felt like a Packers game day. That was the environment I had. I experienced. A lot of people not necessarily tailgating, right? Because there really wasn't a lot of areas to do that, but just people kind of hanging out and having some beverages and bands playing and music going on. It just gave off game day vibes with that. And there was other areas too, depending on where you're parking, you could tailgate in that, and there was that environment. But it just felt like overall a game day environment before the draft got going. So, in terms of the picks, now the Matthew Golden pick, to kind of recap it or revisit it, I guess from Friday, there was I thought a lot of talent on the board that they could go a couple different ways. Whether it was Hairston from Kentucky, the corner, Matthew Golden was the pick, and I think more so I was surprised they actually did it. And again, a big time shout out to Mark Murphy for setting it up perfectly and teeing it up perfectly. I liked the pick for Matthew Golden. I think, with the speed that he brings, the route running that he brings, he's really good at securing the catch. I thought it was a really good pick for Green Bay at that point, at number 23, to be able to get him where a lot of people thought, or from the experts out there, for a lot of people, the number one wide receiver in this draft, for him to fall at number 23. And Peter Schrager got it. He got it in his mock, and he kind of said it too, for him to be at Green Bay at number 23, who was a lot of teams' number one wide receiver on their boards. For Green Bay to get it, I think, is a win, and that's a big win for Green Bay to be able to get him. And then you look at what they did in the later picks. Anthony Belton, the big offensive lineman from NC State, 6'6", 335. He played left tackle, but there is some thoughts that he's maybe better suited for guard or even right tackle into the NFL. But again, you get a massive human being who could play maybe multiple spots on the offensive line. And the Packers getting some depth. Maybe he starts off as their swing tackle for this year. But you're getting more depth at that tackle spot. You're getting more depth potentially at an interior offensive line if they view him as a guy that can play multiple spots, 4 spots on the offensive line, tackle or those guard positions. So just a massive human being standing there at 6'6" and coming in weighing 335 pounds. It's a pick that makes sense. You're getting depth on the offensive line. Then I think what probably surprised a lot of Packers fans and people is that with their 3rd round pick, Packers go out and get another wide receiver. Savion Williams from TCU, 6'4", 220 pounds. And you're thinking, okay, they got their big receiver, their big outside receiver. But that's not the whole story when it comes to Williams from TCU. He is a Swiss Army gadget type player, and a ton of player comps for him all over the place are Cordero Patterson, because of how TCU used him, not only just as a wide receiver, but a little bit as a running back, even wildcat quarterback. I mean, last year he had 6 receiving touchdowns at TCU, but also 6 rushing touchdowns. And if you read a lot of the scouting reports surrounding him, a lot of people will note, if he gets into an offense with a creative offensive play caller or a play caller that will use him in multiple different spots, he could be really effective and really utilized as a weapon on the offensive side. Well, here we go. Bring him into Matt LaFleur. Maybe there's a little bit of a Deebo Samuel comparison too, because of his ability to play out of the backfield or line up as a wide receiver. But I think as long as Matt LaFleur and this Packers offense utilizes him the right way, utilizes him as a guy that, he's not just a straight-up wide receiver that you line up on the outside. You're utilizing him as a guy that you could do multiple things with, then I think you're going to get the most out of him. And the fact that this is a guy that can take the ball out of the backfield and he's 6'4", 220 pounds and just trying to get the ball in his hands to make plays, I think that's a threat and a unique thing that you can add to this offense. But I will say, I also think it puts guys like a Romeo Doubs on notice. Like, all right, you're an impending free agent, but we're going to protect ourselves with some more depth. The Packers replenished the farm system with their wide receivers. This is something that we've talked about at how many times that Ted Thompson did a really good job at. Was always making sure that the cupboard was full with wide receivers. And I think Goody did that by getting 2 wide receivers within the first 3 picks that he had. Replenishing that cupboard, protecting this team that if Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson are on their way out after this year, in steps these guys. I wouldn't necessarily close the door on Christian Watson. If I had to pick one receiver that I think maybe is a little bit more out the door than the other, I'd probably pick Romeo Doubs. But again, I think if you're Green Bay, you're looking at Romeo Doubs with his concussion history, with what he did or with what happened to him last year, and obviously with Watson's injury. Packers protecting themselves and increasing their depth and getting that quote-unquote farm system with their wide receivers back up and running. So I liked the pick because he's a different type of receiver, and they're bringing in different styles of weapons. You bring in Matthew Golden, who's got the speed, who's got really good route running and good hands. You follow it up by bringing in a bigger wide receiver, but he could do multiple things, not just lining up as wide receiver, but a guy that you can hand the ball off to in the backfield, a guy that you're giving him the ball quickly to make some plays with the ball in his hands. So I liked it. I know it surprised a lot of people, but I'm like, okay, you're getting Jordan Love and you're getting this offense some more weapons. Then coming up the final day with 3 straight picks, starting with their 4th rounder, all defensive line picks for the Packers. And they all are kind of different, too. Started off with Barrett Sorrell from Texas, who was at the draft. Stuck around. Got his name called on day 3. And if you haven't watched his presser afterwards with the Packers media, go and do it. He's going to be an early fan favorite if you haven't watched it. The kid's incredibly emotional towards his parents and such. But, I mean, this guy, for him to stick around because he wanted to experience the draft and he wanted to experience his name getting called, and lo and behold, it was with the hometown team that's hosting the draft. It was just a really cool moment. But you look at him, and he's listed at 6'3", about 255, 260 pounds. And last year he started all 16 games with Texas, 44 tackles, 11 of them were tackles for loss, 6 sacks. And a lot of people thought he'd be like a 3-4 edge rusher because of his size. But it'll be interesting. I think Green Bay is going to put him at that 4-3 defensive end. He's going to be a guy that, is going to be straight up, I think, kind of a pass rusher type of role. Maybe Green Bay's hoping to add a little bit more muscle to him, a little bit more weight to him. But he's going to be a 4-3 D end, I would expect, within this Packers defense. And then in the 5th round, again, this is kind of an interesting player in terms of what is his role going to be for Green Bay. And that's Colin Oliver from Oklahoma State. Now, they list him as an edge, but you look at it, and his size is about 6'2", 240 to 245 pounds. And he's kind of that, okay, is he a off-ball linebacker or just kind of a designated pass rusher? And that's honestly where I feel like he's going to be for the Packers. Is that he's going to be maybe listed, not necessarily a 4-3 defensive end, but a pass rush specialist to begin his career with the Packers. Maybe he develops into something more, maybe in a bigger role. But when you read his scouting reports and when you read on what a lot of the experts out there have to say, they're talking about a very solid, a very good pass rusher. He's got all the talent in the world as a rusher. As one of the reports said, a natural edge rusher with outstanding fluidity and movement talent. But it's the size where he's not just your typical 4-3 D end or even a 3-4 outside linebacker. And that's where a lot of people thought, okay, is he kind of an off-ball linebacker? I think for Green Bay's purposes, right away, he may be your straight-up kind of pass rush specialist. And then in the 6th round, they continue with some defensive line help, and they bring in Warren Brinson from Georgia, 6'5", 315 pounds. D-tackle there, you're talking about probably interior, 3 technique, 1 technique. type of D tackle to add some more depth to that group. And then finally, it was the 7th round when the Packers selected their first corner, Micah Robinson from Tulane. And then they get another offensive lineman, John Williams from Cincinnati, another guy who played left tackle, but again, maybe is a guy that they could utilize all across the line of scrimmage. Because he is, again, a lot of scouting reports say that he has a guard type of body when it comes to the NFL level. So, experience playing tackle, but maybe better suited for guard. And then after the draft, it's the undrafted free agent class, and I don't want to, deep dive into every one of them, but I think one of them is an intriguing one, and it's back to Georgia on that defensive line, and it's Nazir Stackhouse, a massive defensive tackle, 6'4", 327 pounds. This is your TJ Slaton fill-in guy, or replacement guy. This is a 2-down defensive lineman who is in there to help stop the run. This is the guy. This is your nose tackle. This is your guy that you're going to put in early downs to clog up some of those lanes, to eat up some of the offensive linemen, and to help stop the run. Stackhouse, to me, is the, every year when we get to preseason and training camp, who's that undrafted free agent rookie, who is that 7th round pick that has the potential to make that 53-man roster. Stackhouse, to me, is the early front runner for this. A guy that was projected to be a day 3 pick, maybe in the 5th round, 6th round, doesn't get drafted, and the Packers were able to pick him up. I think that's a nice win for Green Bay to sign him and to add some size and some more depth to that defensive line. And again, you look at it with those 3 straight picks of defensive line / edge help, you're getting more depth within those trenches and maybe even protecting yourself a little bit, depending on the futures of Carl Brooks and Colby Wooden. So even though it wasn't day 1 or day 2 with defensive line help or edge rushers, they're getting guys in to provide more depth, to be able to be more of a rotational piece within that defensive line. And I think, again, helping maybe protect themselves here a little bit for future in case we don't know what the future is going to be like for Carl Brooks and Colby Wooden and such when they hit the free agent market, if they hit the free agent market. But there is one position group that I thought, okay, maybe I would have liked to have seen them. I don't want to come off like saying, this is a perfect class and all that. And again, I don't want to grade it because we don't know how these players are going to perform, right? We don't know how their futures are going to be. We don't know how their careers are going to be. But if there was one class or one position group that I was a little surprised that maybe they didn't address a little bit earlier, and maybe it was just based off how the board felt, but it was corner. They got Micah in the 7th round. But you look at the depth now, and it sure looks like they're going to roll in with their top 3 corners being Keyshawn Nixon, Hobbs, and Carrington Valentine, with Javon Bullard playing maybe a little bit of the slot too. I know Jair Alexander is still on this roster, and Jair Alexander has been participating, in some of these team activities and such. But you still listen to Brian Gutekunst after the draft, and he still paints the picture of a guy that will not be with his team with this upcoming season. I mean, he's saying all the things without flat out saying he will not be on our team. You read between the lines. Jair, I would be shocked as all get out if he is still suiting up for the Packers week 1. So with that, and then looking at this draft and seeing Green Bay not addressing corner until the 7th round, that was a position group I was like, okay, I'm a little surprised they didn't address earlier. And we talked about it last week. If there was a position group, because there always seems to be in the last few years that position group that we feel like that Green Bay is going to address early, that they're going to go out and get a guy early. And sometimes they don't. Last year it was corner. I think a lot of us had picked corner early for Green Bay. That didn't happen. It was king in the 7th round. Maybe it was corner again this year, where they didn't address the corner spot until the 7th round. So maybe 2 years in a row where a lot of us, including myself, thought they would address corner early. And they didn't until the 7th round. So I think looking ahead to this team and looking at how the roster is right now, for me personally, the question mark that I have is probably the corner depth. That to me is number one. But overall, again, I think there's some intriguing picks here. I think there's some picks here where, especially the wide receivers, a couple different styles that I think will mix in well with what they currently have on their roster, what they currently have on their depth chart at the wide receiver spot. You got offensive linemen that can play multiple spots, tackle or guard. Even your defensive linemen are all different, whether it's a specialized pass rusher, a more typical 4-3 DNs, or an interior defensive tackle. You brought in different, unique sets of skills with your defensive tackles or your defensive linemen. And that's kind of something that stood out to me with these picks too, is like, it seems like there's carved out roles for these guys, or they all bring in something different. It's not just like they added up defensive linemen that are all 6'4" and 300 pounds. They all bring something a little bit different. And I'm really curious to see if they can maybe untap a lot of that potential.